Welcome back to the Breaking Bias podcast. I'm your co-host, Molly, and I am joined by my incredible co-host, Dr. Obbs. How are you doing, Obbs? I am super excited to get into this week's pod.
I'm doing great, Molly. I had to remind myself if we had a race again this weekend because we've had so many back-to-back races, but I'm not complaining. This is what we need. Like, let's just drink Formula One and motorsports out of a fire hose.
This is the last race of the triple header, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Last one.
So,
and then wait.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we got a break. Yeah.
Yep. And then we have a break, and then it's back at it again. I think it's a double header, then triple again. So we're gonna.
Is it Miami?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
I should know this, and just time is a flat circle.
Everything runs together.
I also am still a little bit like, my brain is still fried because I've spent the last few days doing F1 in schools nationals judging, which has been super fun.
Very cool.
But so it was very intensive.
What that is, yeah.
Explain. So F1 in schools, it was just recently rebranded to STEM racing in the US, but it's essentially F1 in schools. And essentially teams build a 1/20th scale F1 car that does a straight line drag race powered by a CO2 canister on a track. And Worlds are in Singapore this year, coinciding with the Singapore Grand Prix. So I spent the past 3 days being an engineering judge. So basically reviewing engineering portfolios and then getting to interview the teams on their engineering decisions, what led them to do what they would do, kind of probing about CFD results and all of that and doing that. So I'm a little brain fried, but it was super fun. These kids are so impressive, and I'm like, the future is in good hands. So it was super fun.
Giving back, that's what it's all about. That's fantastic, Molly.
Oh, yeah, it was super fun. Awesome. Yeah, so I think let's get into the triple header though, because we're 2/3 of the way through, and my goodness, has a lot happened. I think between China and the showing we had there, and then Japan, and then how this all kind of, I think, is going to build up to what could be an interesting race in Bahrain.
Absolutely, yeah. So for any of our listeners, we'll go through China and we'll go through Japan, but stay tuned because we got some spicy stuff we'll be discussing at the end. But if we start with the China sprint race, sprint weekend, resurfaced track, right?
Yes.
I think. Yes. Resurfaced track, a bit of weather, as well during the weekend. And we had a sprint race. So then, very little time to set up the car. And who wins the sprint race? Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton. Yes. That was huge for Lewis, I think. And the Tifosi, that was like the Tifosi welcoming in Lewis into the club.
I was at the bar watching that race because of time zones, and I was like sitting at the bar, and I looked at my friends and a couple of people sitting at the bar, and I was like, I'm sorry for the person I'm about to become as he crosses this checkered flag line, right? Like the start finish. That was awesome, and I was really excited because it seemed like the Ferrari had pace.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, the whole is Ferrari back sort of thing, like running through my head. And I'm thinking, man, they're fast. Cause like, he didn't just win. He
won by
ran
a lot.
Away from, who was P2? Remind me. Was it Piastri or Norris?
One of the McLarens.
Piastri. I think it was Piastri, and Max was P3, I think.
Yeah. I don't know. It was McLarens.
And Lando was back because I don't think he had a great qualifying, did he? And he was kind of trapped behind a bunch of cars and a DRS train and all this stuff. So, exactly. We're thinking, okay, is Ferrari back? Does this mean that they're gonna, be on top of things again?
Actually challenge McLaren, because I think a lot of people are fearing that McLaren's going to win every race, or almost all of them, like Max did a few seasons ago. Mm-hmm. Like, oh my gosh, Ferrari nailed it. And then,
but there's an and then.
And then the DQ happened.
Yeah, it did.
Which, again, on plankware.
Yeah, plankware and then
underweight
as well. So Lewis had the plankware, right?
Yes.
And Charles had the was underweight, I
believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm just looking at my notes here. Yeah, our notes. Yeah, car 16. Okay, so Ferrari basically said car 16 found to be underweight. Lewis's rear skid. Mm-hmm. For people that don't know, along the plank, you've got multiple skids. You've got front, middle, back, and so the rear skids were worn down past the allowed, so 0.5 millimeters below the limit. Charles was on a one-stop strategy today, meant his tire wear was very high, causing the car to be underweight. Regards to Lewis's skid wear, we misjudged the consumption by a small margin. There was no intention to gain any advantage, and they go on and on. So, what do we think was going on? Was Ferrari trying to find an advantage by doing this? Was this just something that is this has happened before, right? It happened to Mercedes in Austin, and
It also happened to
it also
Ferrari and
happened to
Austin.
Ferrari in
Yep.
Austin as well. Yeah,
Charles
exactly.
and Lewis again.
Yeah. So is this just something that is like a symptom of these kinds of cars that we're dealing with here? What do we think is going on?
So I think there's a couple things. I personally think they may have underfueled Charles. Maybe.
Yeah.
If that's where the weight came in, to try and give him a pace advantage from a weight standpoint, and
Well,
then
they naturally underfuel all cars, right?
More so than they normally would underfuel.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Okay.
is where I'm getting at. Like they underfueled more than they normally would.
Yeah.
To try and get a pace advantage, and then use to, once he's got a big gap or builds a gap, use that to do a lot of LECO and manage it that way through the mapping and what they're telling him to do. But that's where I go on the Charles side of being underweight. And I mean, if you watch his onboards, he's in the grass trying to do pickup and get more weight on that car. Typically, you're just kind of swerving through the rubber, but I mean, he's on the grass trying to get more weight onto that car, which stuck out to me as like, I think maybe on the Charles side, there was some performance advantage. And we talked about this previously on their ride height and trying to lower things and get performance. I think that was an episode or two ago.
We did.
I actually do really wonder if Ferrari found something in ride height that was advantageous for them to take on. And that is what led to the performance at China. But it did come at the cost of plank wear, and it was too excessive at that point, right?
Yeah. And there was, we did talk about it. We talked about it after the Australian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Where there was the comments that came from Charles, I think, saying they had to make some compromises for the race.
They tried something and
so
all of that.
Maybe their performance window really is so low, but the risk you run in going so low is rear plank wear, especially at the rear, It may just be that they simply need to run the rear very low to find the performance. And they just flew too close to the sun.
We're finding, and this is a trend we've talked about, I think, for a year or so now, is we're seeing negative rake start to creep back in a car that would normally be typically more rake neutral. We're starting to see a slight bit of negative rake, which would put your rear lower, kind of creeping in.
Yeah. Yeah. True. So in my opinion, I totally agree with you there, Molly. I think that the car right now is, and we are on the cusp of a Ferrari upgrade in Bahrain. So we'll just caveat these comments by saying that we are speaking to what's going on in China and everything. In Japan.
By the time this episode is out, we should see the upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. So this could all go away, or maybe not, because
I still think it's important to understand in the situation around Ferrari with this big package coming this weekend.
Yeah, and not just necessarily Ferrari either. I think generally speaking, a lot of cars on the grid have commented around, how temperamental the cars are when it comes to ride height setups and everything.
Yeah.
This is something that Red Bull struggles with themselves, being that the car is again temperamental to set up. We saw it in China. We saw it in Japan. So I think this is what Ferrari's struggling with. They've just got to get so low to find the performance.
Yep.
And maybe also, by the way, Molly, I mean, we talk about like drivers having different needs.
Yes.
And so why did Lewis's plank wear out and Charles didn't? Maybe it's because Lewis likes a bit of a tighter rear on the, on corner to where it's not so loose. And so he can live with a bit more understeer, kind of rear bias balance versus Charles, who might like it a bit more on the nose. So they might have done some differences in the setup to accommodate Lewis, and maybe that's what I'll call it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. That I think leads to different setups. You can assume there's something different going on there because it would have been the same disqualification otherwise.
Yeah. And in the race, the McLarens ran away with it. I mean, you saw Piastri and Norris just completely gap the field and take off. And then it was just sort of who's going to finish third, fourth,
Where?
and fifth.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who's the best of the rest at that point?
Exactly. So I think McLaren really showed their pace. It was very interesting, though, to see Lando struggle so much in the sprint, being in traffic.
Yes.
And maybe that was a foreshadowing to some of what happens in Suzuka.
Yes.
Right. So I don't know if we want to transition from China to Suzuka yet.
I was going to say, I think that's probably actually a really good segue, because I do also have some thoughts on McLaren and Suzuka, as many do.
Please do share. Let's jump right into that, Molly. What do you got?
Okay. Yeah. So Suzuka happened. There was, I think, a lot of talking points from what otherwise was kind of a dull processional Suzuka race, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and I was like really excited and really hype, and then I sat there. I watched it in bed because time zones, and I was like, I can't believe I stayed up for this. Like, and like there was some amount of strategy, but it was still like, this is really boring for a Suzuka race. And so but then it was like, but the lead up to the race was really exciting because we got Max on pole in what was an unreal pole lap. That car was a handful, but they had been kind of struggling all through the weekend. And I wasn't sure if this was the typical, they've turned it up and they've got all the tools understood, and this is just GP's excellence in helping Max get a handle on a car with all of his tools and kind of optimizing the performance, or what. But my gosh, what a lap and everything, right?
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, Horner, Max, everybody admitted they pretty much turned the car upside down from Friday to Saturday. But as you mentioned, though, the car was still a handful. I mean, it just was not in this spot where it was like easy to drive or anything. I mean, we could very easily see now Yuki ran a different. It's so cool. We're talking about Yuki now in the Red Bull.
Oh my gosh, he had such a good weekend too.
He did, yeah. I was super, as the Brits say, chuffed. I was super chuffed for Yuki. I think it was great. Obviously, a little bit of problems during qualifying. Something that he mentioned, not to deviate too much, but Molly, something that he mentioned that I caught on another podcast I was listening to was that he said that during tire prep. So we all know Pirelli changed the tires this year, and there's a lot of like hemming and hawing in the teams to try to understand the tires. There's a bit of frustration.
Yes.
And he did a tire prep like he usually does in the V-Carb.
Uh-huh.
He did that in the RB21, and apparently in the Q2 session, it's absolutely and the temps were dropping a bit between the sessions. And he said, come to find out when they look back on it, this is absolutely what you should not do in the RB21. So his tires were not ready for that lap. And it's funny though, because of the fact that like we think of drivers moving from one team to another, we're like, okay, just kind of got to get a handle of the car and all this stuff. But no, there's characteristics of the car that drive things like, how do you drive it on a lap when you go into tire preservation mode? How do you prep the tires for a hot lap, for a qualifying lap, and all these things? And so these are all things he has to learn. And, Yuki pretty much, admitted it right there that there are differences between the V-Carb and the RB21 and how you do tire prep, which I thought was pretty interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't catch that because I think there were some comments from, I want to say it was Helmet, but I could be wrong about, there was maybe some issues around what was coming out of the simulator and on track again. They're having further affirming that we were thinking there were correlation problems happening.
Yeah. Basically said whatever the simulator gave us for initial setup was like completely wrong. And they had to almost go the opposite direction when they flipped the car upside down from Friday to Saturday. So this, seems to still be some issues there from correlating the performance that you see in the simulator to the performance that you actually get on the track.
Yeah, and I think to also be doing a lot of that without your number ones there. And you saw the Collar twins weren't there, who are both sides number ones. I think due to some family stuff at home, they were not present. So they had standby folks in place of them. So to be doing that without your literal number one mechanics, I think is a huge attest as well.
That's something I heard in the post-race broadcast was that the pit crew was not the normal pit crew. and there was some stand-ins.
Yep. Yeah, so they had stand-in on the crew. One of them is on a wheel. I don't remember what the other collar twin does on the stops, but they're like fixtures
Yeah.
of that pit crew and fixtures in the garage. So I think that was crazy, or not necessarily crazy, but I think that is like maybe that's like a big part of this weekend as well. And knowing Red Bull and how they work,
and it almost cost them a little bit too, right?
yeah,
Because you
I was,
mentioned that it wasn't a very exciting race. The most exciting bit was when Max and Lando pitted at the same time,
yeah,
and then it was like, who's coming out first? It was like the NASCAR race this
yeah,
weekend.
I love that.
It
Yeah,
was so great at
I
the
was
end. I
like,
mean,
they're
I was
drag racing. I was like,
yes, I was pumped for Denny at the end, but
oh
that's
my
just
gosh,
because I'm a Denny
yeah,
fan. But it was
yeah,
like it was just very much like who's gonna come out?
mm-hmm.
This is where the pit teams, the pit crews are gonna
Yeah,
make the difference. Red Bull was just a little slow than their normal,
yep,
and the McLaren pit crew was just on it. And like
mm-hmm.
Lando he's so close to being side by side, but he was about halfway up Max's
Yeah.
car when he came up. Yeah,
Which by rule, Max has the line then at that
yeah.
point on exit. So sorry,
Exactly. And then there
but
was
yeah,
all the drama and stuff of, I love how the drivers will get on the radio and try and get, a penalty for the other one.
that's peak racing. Whatever it takes
Yeah.
to get your competition at a disadvantage for you. And like knowing how Red Bull works, if there was something that went wrong in that stop with reserve crew or something they would want to reserve on, they'll do like a full, like essentially a post mortem
Yeah.
and go over everything and correct everything to make sure it doesn't happen again. Like anytime there's a bad stop, they do that. So they'll learn from it, and that was something that, from what I've been told, was really instilled by Wheatley being there. That's like a big cultural thing that he instilled when he was sporting director. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that they'll look at that.
Great.
So, do you think that Red Bull fans have any reason to be worried at this point, or is it you're kind of reserving judgment for the upcoming upgrade that they're bringing in a couple races, we believe, or do you think kind of the max effect plus the GP of it all and the toolbox that he has available to getting Max into a comfortable window might just kind of level out until we get
Yeah.
upgrades?
Well, for me, I mean, I think probably no surprise to people. I mean, I think Max is an incredible driver. I think if
Mm-hmm.
you are a Red Bull fan or not, you can't not look at like this weekend or that weekend in Suzuka, that pole lap we mentioned, and not
Mm-hmm.
identify with the man being a special talent. But
Yes.
as an engineer, if I just kind of take off my fandom for a minute as an engineer and think about what are the tools, and we've talked about this before, Molly. You
Mm-hmm.
spend the majority of your time developing a car away from the track, and
Yeah.
you have tools that help you to do that. And so if these tools are not useful in helping you to simulate track performance and find a setup that is valuable or brings performance on the
Mm-hmm.
car in real life, then how confident can you be in
Yeah.
updates that are
Mm-hmm.
based off of the same models that are being used to generate the
Yeah.
simulator data? And I'm just thinking like there's something in there that's not correlating, not
Yep.
translating. And how is this potentially going to affect the next update package that's coming in Imola?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it won't make it hit as much as in performance as they think it will.
Mm-hmm.
That's the concern that I would
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree totally with you. And I mean, I think talking about the impact you think it's gonna have, I think let's switch gears in Suzuka and talk about kind of the processional and McLaren of it all, right? Like McLaren's were faster, but they couldn't pass. That was a
Yeah.
really, really tough race to pass. Do you have any insights? I know I have some thoughts, but I want to get your thoughts first.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, from my side, I think we've talked about like the dirty air problem. We've been
Mm-hmm.
talking about this we talked about it last season during the
Yeah.
podcast as well. It's just getting worse and worse, and I think I
Yep.
got a bit on my soapbox at that time when we first talked about it around the fact that like you can't expect to see fast cars that are generating record lap times like we had a record lap time in
Mm-hmm.
Suzuka,
Yeah.
with Max's record lap time. You cannot expect to have record lap times and not have dirty air. Why? Because as a car moves through air, Okay, it's hard because you have to sort of shift your frame of reference. A car is not standing still and air being blown over it, but it's a car moving through air. The car is doing work on air, and
Air doing work on the
air is
car,
doing work on
arrow.
car. It's like, yeah, equal opposite, right? And so the result of that, the work is like generating downforce, and then what you don't like is the drag component of it. So you're essentially disturbing the air in the creation of these loads, or
Mm-hmm.
translation of energy from one form to another. And the thing that's left is disturbance.
Mm-hmm.
That is wake. So if you want more downforce because you want to generate faster lap times, guess what? The wake's going to get worse. It's just
Yep.
physics. It's
Yep.
how energy moves from one place to another, and
Mm-hmm.
you get this massive energy deficit behind the cars, and this is what we get. The
Yeah.
one thing we can do, which I think we're trying to do, or the FIA is trying to do with 2026, is make the car smaller, because you can still generate downforce and do all these things. Now, granted, your planform, your space, all this area you have to generate downforce is shrinking as well when the cars get
Mm-hmm.
smaller. So technically, you aren't going to have as much downforce availability either. So there's a trade off there. Like, what do
Yeah.
we want? Do we want to see cars doing record lap times, but they're just racing themselves? Or do we want to see cars going still fast, but
Mm-hmm.
racing each other?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Molly?
I totally agree with that. And I think we're at a point as well in this regulation set where the amount of performance that you need to find in your car and your setup to overcome the gaps that get created by the clean versus dirty air effect aren't there, right? I think if you looked at it, the McLarens would have had to find like over a second pace
Yeah.
to be able to even try and close the gap because of the effects of dirty air versus clean air. And when they're hanging out in cleanish air with that gap, it's better for them and they're able to put good pace on track. But then to try and push to pass a car, they have to find pace that at this point I don't know is findable, or
Yeah.
findable. That's not a real word, but you know what I mean. I don't know if there's that pace out there to even find and
Yeah, it's not
achieve, right?
achievable. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Achievable pace, right? Because I mean, we know McLaren's the fastest car on the grid, but then
Yep.
to turn around and say, well, in traffic, they still have to find a second.
Yeah.
That's over a second. That's a lot, and that's I don't think you're gonna be able to do that. And we're kind of in an era of regulations where you're like a tenth here, a tenth there, maybe a couple hundred points of downforce. It's not gonna be anything crazy like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The margins are you're exactly right, Molly. The margins are so fine right now.
Mm-hmm.
The grid is really compressed.
Yeah.
Um, and you're 100% right. The wake effect when you're in that sort of a scenario is going to be significantly larger. And so Suzuka also, we do know Suzuka is not a great track for passing, but they do have the one finish straight with the DRS zone, but it's not long enough to really
No.
have an effect. Now, the positive side of large disturbances is the toe becomes really
Yes.
powerful.
Yes, which I think we saw in qualifying.
Yes, we saw it in qualifying, but also we saw it on the laps when
We did, yeah.
Lando was following Max. You
Mm-hmm.
saw as they were going through 130R and that whole long straight section right there, Lando was like gaining on Max, and he would
Yeah.
be right up on the back of him going into the hairpin.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming out of the hairpin, Max just really needed to not put a foot wrong, and he didn't. He's just
Correct.
metronomic. I mean, the guy is like a clock, and he didn't put a foot wrong. So then Lando was just, I guess, waiting for him to make a mistake. Didn't happen. So, but by the time you had then the concertina effect that would happen in the hairpin, and then Max being able to get drive out of the hairpin,
Yeah.
and Lando trying to then close with DRS, you couldn't close. There also wasn't a
No.
braking zone into turn one either.
Exactly.
So it's like, yeah, it's just not a good track for that kind of a thing. Bahrain could be different. I mean, we'll get
Yes, it
into
could.
that later
Yeah.
on expectations and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I do think dirty air is absolutely a problem, but
Still.
it's
Always
not
has been.
it's not surprising late in a regulation set because everybody's eking out every single thing
Yep.
they can to find performance.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, speaking of performance, what do you think about is the V carb better than the RB right now theories and kind of what people are saying? Because I mean, look
Yeah.
at that freaking in race and qualifying performance that they have
Yeah.
been putting up,
Isaac
right?
Hadjar. Isaac
Yeah.
Hadjar. A perfect example right there. I mean, rookie driver. What does he do? What is it, P6 or P7? I can't
Yeah.
remember.
P6, I think it was.
P6 in qualifying. I mean, held position besides getting passed by Lewis Hamilton, which
Yeah.
that's nothing to really be ashamed of.
No, that's the GOAT.
Yeah, so basically, holds position as well in the V carb, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking, all right, yeah, what's the deal going on here? I think that the V carb is more drivable, and Yuki has even
Mm-hmm.
admitted that. I mean,
Yeah.
the V carb is more drivable. The RB21, there was a comment from Yuki
Mm-hmm.
about the RB21. Don't quote me if it was like after qualifying or after the race, but he essentially said Max's car control is amazing. That the car is like very twitchy and
Mm-hmm.
temperamental, and like he's having to like make little minor corrections just to keep the car on track.
Mm-hmm.
And Max, like you look at his pole lap, and he's just very smooth with the inputs
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So his car control is exquisite. So I think that the RB21 is more temperamental. It's like anything that performs where like the ceiling is higher,
Yeah.
but the basement is lower as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you can really be in the mud with that car, or
Yeah.
you can really be high and like performing really well. Whereas the V carb is like smaller performance window, but
Mm-hmm.
higher reliability that you can stay in that
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. So there was a lot of hee hee ha ha. Your little team that could is outdoing your main team,
window.
and I was like, hey, they've been on this path of improving and being closer to RB, and I was like, this might be the season. And I hate that it's the last year of the regulation set that they might have finally nailed it, but that I
Yeah.
think that makes a lot of sense.
But all credit to the team there. I mean, they're
Yeah,
just like, they're doing a great job. Now, granted, I
yeah.
think it's this year they're using more parts from the
They
RB20.
are. They were still on 2019 steering racks and stuff as of last year. So they're
Yeah.
finally, I think, on something more
Yeah.
current. I do know I spotted it in the garage. They lost one of their long-term performance engineers to Ferrari, I think. I saw him
Mm.
in red on the
Okay.
broadcast. He
Okay.
used to be on it was like right hand to Pierre Hamlin on it was the 10 side of the garage for a very, very
Mm.
long time and then
Mm.
became whoever took over for Pierre. I totally just my brain is still dead. But it's like he was on the whoever the Pierre Hamlin side, the DR side of the garage, like whoever Pierre Hamlin had, he was his performance engineer. So I saw what looked like him at Ferrari. So that's
Yeah.
a pretty big loss in the garage to a mainstay like that.
Yeah.
I think they have a trajectory that looks really promising though. And I think I said first one of my takes is I think this could be a year for V Carb.
Yeah. I mean, it's the midfield, V carb, Williams, I guess Alpine,
Yeah.
more or less Haas, depending on the racetrack.
Well, we know that Haas has a problem. They have
Yeah.
said that they have a problem. So I think until we know that Haas has resolved the problem with the floor, I hold judgment, right?
But did you hear about what Haas did? So for Suzuka, they fast tracked a
Yes.
diffuser update.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if it was like a full floor or just a
No, I think it was
diffuser.
a part of the floor.
Okay, so then maybe it was just the diffuser part. They fast tracked the update. It seemed to work in Suzuka, but what I heard from the F1 post race show is that they never ran it in the wind tunnel. What they did was they basically they did it in CFD. They were like, "Yep, good. We got to get this out. Let's just build it and send it to the track." They completely skipped the wind tunnel, sent it to the track, and on just a hope and a prayer, and it hit. That's cool.
I
That is really
I
cool.
did not know that.
Yeah,
I
they
mean, if
mentioned that.
that isn't peak, they trust their model
Yeah,
that they're like, you know what? I'm willing to accept the risk of ensuring that it correlates in the wind tunnel and just
yeah,
shipping it. Like they didn't want to spend the credits, the hours in the
yeah.
tunnel with that. Whoa.
And they didn't have the time either. They
Yeah.
just were like, "Look, let's just trust." Yeah, you're right. Trust the tool, and let's figure out what's going on, put it on the track.
Mm-hmm.
You win or lose, this could be incredibly
Yeah.
awesome or this could be incredibly terrible. But at the end of the day, they got real track data for, an entire race distance over an entire race weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it wasn't as optimized as it could be. It seemed to fix some of the issues that they were having, but they've got real data now. And if they wanted to tweak it even more,
they can.
So our friend Zavi Gasquez, who takes all the amazing pictures,
Yes.
took a picture of the Haas diffuser. Have you seen it, Molly?
I have not.
You should go check it out.
Okay. All right.
It's super cool. It's super cool. So it's like, you remember back in the day, like the first time that we saw the Williams floor in Monaco when they raised it up and we were all like, what the heck? Like, this thing is like so basic compared to everybody else's floors. And then everybody went on to take pictures of diffusers after that. We saw the Haas diffuser and we were like, that thing just looks so plain Jane, and like Red Bull, Ferrari, everybody else, Mercedes have got like all these cool contours in the walls of the diffuser. Well, Haas's diffuser is legit. Like, I took the picture and I sent it to one of my friends that's a Red Bull Aero, and I was like, hey, check this out. Have you seen it? And this person was like genuinely like impressed with how complex it was, and like was like, Haas is cooking. Like, that's pretty good right there.
They are cooking.
Credit to Haas. That's
wow.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it right now. They are cooking. I'm excited for the rest of that floor to come in now.
Yeah.
Wow. Or new flat floor and diffuser among other details. So maybe they did bring floor.
Oh, did they bring a floor as well? I didn't see if it was floor plus diffuser.
Wow. It says floor plus diffuser on Zavi's post. I just went and looked at it. So
okay. So then there you go. Then the floor would have been in the same thing, because the whole comment in the post race show was, whatever they did, floor diffuser combo, they never ran it in the tunnel. Just straight up produced it, put it on the car.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that is so motorsports. That's like, and it's just, you know what? It shows you the difference in risk mitigation of like conventional automotive and motorsports, where it's like motorsports, like, you know what, I have to have this, and I've never run in the wind tunnel, but the model looks good. I like how it looks in the tools. I'm going to trust my tools and just ship it. And I mean, I feel like in this, I don't know how segmented the two organizations are, but I mean, Haas runs in a series where there is no practice, and practice is extremely limited, and you have to trust your tools when bringing something and setting up something and analyzing something for the track, right? With NASCAR, they only have such limited practice. You have to roll off a truck having trusted everything virtually, right? And so I don't know if maybe there's some lessons learned there
from DNA,
from the Haas of it all, you know, because I mean, same name, I mean, they do have folks that are based here in North Carolina for that program, so
could be. No, that's a hot take there, Molly. I'm buying it. I'm buying it. I think there's things that you can learn within teams. I mean, and there are teams that are more biased to certain sets of data. You know, something I heard a while ago is that Red Bull generally is much more biased to on-track data. They will do things that they, need to do and sort of planning and preparing updates, but that they become much more biased to being willing to run parts and learn from them on track and use the on track data to then confirm development directions or, optimize future updates or whatever. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So that was Japan. Should we pivot and look ahead to Bahrain now?
Yeah, I think so, because I think this is shaping up to be kind of an interesting race weekend on a high deg track, right?
Yeah. So speaking of high deg, so track profile for maybe some of our listeners that don't know, Bahrain is, yes, a high degradation circuit. It's typically where you're going to end up having multiple pit stops. You also can have very, very variable. Is that a word?
Yes.
You can have a lot of variability in conditions from, wind, right? You can get a lot of wind in Bahrain. You can also get like variations in temperature from a day running in FP to now a night session, which is like much cooler, and the track temps have dropped significantly. So what we're looking at is...
Are we front or rear limited here?
Rear limited. Rear limit in Bahrain. So that naturally is going to tend itself to the teams with the cars that are much more happier and kind of rear limited track types. But not just that, but getting back to what we were saying as well on the variability, tracks or cars that maybe are a bit less sensitive to the variability.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the Red Bull is very sensitive to variability. So yeah, I'm not thinking this can be great for Red Bull. Who do you think it's going to be good for, Molly?
McLaren.
we say begrudgingly.
I'm a little nervous, maybe for Ferrari, if they're gonna run into the same trap of performance with Plankware. I mean, they are getting this upgrade, so we don't know what that's gonna do, because rear limited, usually you're gonna want to wear on your rear more, right?
Yeah, well, rear limited, yeah. So teams that have really good traction are typically going to be good in rear limited tracks, but also teams that have good rear downforce, which gives them a lot of rear grip.
Yeah.
So they're not sliding as much at the rear. Yeah. I think it suits probably Ferrari's style of car.
Yeah, it does.
Your point on the update is a key one. We did test in Bahrain.
Mm-hmm.
So there should be a lot of data from testing that you could maybe analyze to develop an update.
Yeah, that is true. Who's been really good in the low speed so far?
Surprisingly, you want to hear something really surprising about low speed performance is actually that Red Bull's performance in low speed has been good.
Then maybe this might be...
But their traction sucks.
Yeah, that's fair. It's fair.
It's like, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. It's like,
it is.
They get good rotation, and like Jolyn Palmer on Formula1.com always does these like post day one analysis. They present all the data.
Yeah.
Here's what we predict the qualifying gaps are going to be, the race gaps, and they also present then high speed, medium speed, low speed performance, straight line speed. And actually, Red Bull was one of the best in slow speed performance in Suzuka out of the hairpin.
Yeah.
Which actually, Max, if you look at the trace on the time that he made on Lando, it was in the hairpin.
Yeah.
And he took a whole bunch of curb, too, on the first curb. So, like, the part of me that is still suffering from, like, post-traumatic stress disorder from Singapore for, like, 2 years in a row because the Red Bull sucks on curbs is secretly hoping that they seem to have solved the curb problem, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, so low speed performance, I need to go find it. Okay, let me go find it as well. Molly, who do you think is going to be good in Bahrain? Did I already ask you that?
Yeah, you bet. That's what we're talking about.
Sorry. I can't do two things at the same time.
It's okay. How do we feel about Aston?
I haven't been paying attention.
You're like, they suck, I'm not paying attention.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to just say.
Man, what about what about Mercedes?
Mercedes. What do you think about Mercedes, Molly?
I think they could maybe be a contender because they've had a pretty solid long run pace and have looked relatively solid across low speed. I don't know if they're the best of the best in the low speed, but the car seems pretty stable around the rear.
I'll give Mercedes their flowers.
Yeah.
This car certainly seems to be less track temperature sensitive. I think they've remedied that issue. They've solved it.
Yeah.
And it seems to be really well balanced across a lot of different tracks.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think Mercedes is like, I mean, unless Ferrari rolls out this update and it's like mega, you know, I think Mercedes is going to be right there.
Yeah, I think Mercedes could be one to watch, but my fear with Ferrari, and I said this a couple episodes ago, is they're still really struggling with deg, and I'm worried that they backed into the same corner they did a couple years ago, where they're fast in race trim, but the race trim is at the cost of tire deg, and already on a high deg track, it's going to compound, right? I also think, in the terms of struggle, I think Williams could have a tough weekend. Personally,
they're better. Williams is better usually at the higher average speed tracks. I think they're not a downforce monster, but the car seems quite drivable. I mean, even
Yeah.
though Sainz is, kind of struggling a little bit in comparison to Albon, but did you hear how frustrated Alex got with their sort of, I don't know, their strategy or whatever during the race?
Yeah.
And
I was like, are we gonna get our first swearing penalty for radio language? Like, what are we about to get here? I was like, poor Alex, man. And I mean, even McLaren had questionable strategy during the race too. So I'm like,
yeah,
I commend Oscar Lando for not being as explosive as he was. I mean, if I was Oscar, I would be very upset, but
yeah,
that's just me because even if he can't close that pace deficit that Oscar had, that whole, like I'm talking about, it would have been a second or more in the clean air. Switch him back at that point because you know you're not catching Max, right?
yeah,
Let him try. That's my
yeah.
stance on that. But
But
not to side note us.
and I can't take really credit for this take because I heard it from somewhere
Okay.
else. But I wonder if Alex is possibly like, he feels like, okay, this year I've got a car under me,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of my year
Yeah.
to prove myself. You're next to a driver now who's,
Mm-hmm.
experienced and, a really talented driver in his own
Yeah.
right. And Alex is like, I got a car under me. And then so when they make maybe some strategic decisions that don't necessarily align with what he thinks, then he's getting more frustrated because he's like,
Yeah.
opportunity missed, you know?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of opportunity missed, Molly, what did you think
Ooh.
about the whole Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri following Max, and Piastri asking questions about, is Lando saving tires? Can he start to push? Or, was there going to be team orders or not to allow Piastri to pass or make an attempt at Max? What do you think about that whole thing?
I think that McLaren needs to figure out how they handle that at this point because that is going to be their downfall. And not willing, I think, to do that either because as you listen to the conversation, they were never going to let Oscar go by and try, right?
Yeah.
So I think that figuring that out, the papaya rules, whatever they have going on there, I think that they are going to have to figure that out. They're going to either have to put driver orders in
Mm-hmm.
or be more willing to do that because the whole conversation, Oscar's like, I have more pace.
Yeah.
And Oscar's, if you looked at Oscar's lap time, there was a margin,
Mm-hmm.
but as like Oscar had some pace. And so the fact that they were never willing to let him by and keep him in dirty air to see what the clean air of being the leading McLaren would be, I think stuff like that will be their downfall because maybe, just maybe, Oscar could have hung with Max enough to the point where he could get a tire in on him and have a passing line, right?
Yeah.
But that's how I see it. I think that that's something that they need to reckon with internally and make a decision on because yeah, we know that Oscar could pull up to Max or not Oscar. Lando was able to get up to Max, but as Max had really good drive off in the low speed, he couldn't hang. But you have a car that is showing more pace. Why keep it behind your other car, right?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can always switch them back. Give Oscar a couple laps.
Yeah.
If that gap is not closing like you expect it to, or it is even with him pushing, it's still not what you want, switch him back.
Yep. I think you nailed it with that last point,
Yeah.
especially that's where my head's at. Why not just give him a shot?
Yeah.
Let
Because
him
it's,
see if he can do something. If he can't, switch it back.
yeah. Because here's the thing with the gaps in that race and the way that that race was running, you were always going to be 2-3 on that podium unless Oscar did catch Max. You were going to double points.
Yeah.
From a risk assessment towards WDC and WCC.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty risk neutral
Yeah.
to do that on track from a strategy standpoint and maximum possible points standpoint, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But, and also though, in terms of like when they chose to pit which driver,
Yes.
there was some issues there as well though, because for instance, they pitted Piastri first to cover off Russell.
Yes.
And then they could not hold Lando out longer because, which could have been something they could have done to try to find some tire offset at the end to attack Max. They couldn't do it because there was a chance that Piastri was going to undercut Lando.
Yeah.
If they had done that. So then there was like a situation where, no, we can't. They're not prioritizing one driver over another. So they're just sort of floating somewhere in the middle and accepting strategies that harm both drivers instead of help one driver.
Yeah, they want the maximum possible points, but at this you're harming each other at this point. It's like, God forbid you did this coverage and Oscar undercut Lando. If that's how that has to play out to maximize your race result, that's how it played out, right? Like I don't like that they're kind of just being like, and it's essentially shooting themselves in the foot of what they can do and should be doing. Because okay, cool, Oscar's now the lead car and has pace. Awesome, let's work with that, right?
Yeah.
So, and I was like, okay, cool, they're gonna cover here, and was like, okay, how are they gonna lead Lando out? I was the same way. I was like, how is this gonna play out now? But then they pulled him in quite quickly as well.
Yeah, and accepted their fate, honestly, I think, when they did, because they would have known that by then, for sure, that degradation was not as bad as maybe they had anticipated. And you cannot sit back there and just think, well, let's just wait for Max's tires to fall off, or let's just wait for Max to make a mistake. Because Max doesn't make mistakes, and you already knew that the degradation was lower. So I truly feel like when you did that, you accepted the fate of P2 and P3. And yes, they are very vocal. Somebody's pulling in my driveway, so it's distracting me. They are very vocal about, for instance, like, maybe prioritizing constructors over drivers. And we have 2 number 1 drivers, and that puts us in the best place for constructors, which it is true, but it's like, I don't think you're ever going to get to a point to where you're able to attract like a Max Verstappen or somebody like that to a team where, you're running things like that.
Yeah, and I lost my train of thought. Oh, even in instances where, and I'm going to reference some situations with Alpine last year, even where you wind up undercutting your driver who was ahead of the other with however strategy is going to play out. It happened multiple times with Pierre and Esteban, where Esteban would undercut Pierre, which, like, the whole Pierre and Esteban drama of it all, there's other sides to that, but they would ultimately wind up undercutting Pierre with Esteban because they were trying to cover stops off. They would make sure that Pierre got back in front. So as a team, you can still prioritize that while doing that, getting whatever you need out of your strategy, letting it happen, and either, if Esteban was truly faster, which he wasn't in any of the instances they gave Pierre the spot back, they do what they do. There's plenty of instances in it, and it's like, I don't think that I said it already, I don't know if they can continue on doing this if they ever want to land at the top of the Drivers' Championship, because as this championship progresses, you are going to have to prioritize maximizing points for the driver that's leading or the driver that is going to be contending in WDC if that's what you want. And right now, this isn't sustainable for that.
And what happens if that driver is Oscar Piastri? And it's going to ruffle a few feathers, within maybe
I
the
have
team.
Said it once. I have said it again. Oscar WDC before Lando. That is my hot take.
Nice.
That is my hot take.
The Lando Norris fans will be in your DMs.
I don't care. Come for me.
Guess what I found? I found the car performance charts from Suzuka. Okay, so here it is. So in the slows, number 1 was Red Bull.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Number 2, and very close. So number 2 was Ferrari, and very close. Number 3 was Aston Martin.
Oh, I was right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then came the McLaren.
Okay.
After that, and then it was Mercedes, and then it kind of goes up after that. So that was slow speed.
All right.
Medium speed, McLaren was the best through the medium speed corners. Now, granted, this is all data from FP1 and FP2, so the higher you go in speed, the more unreliable the data is going to be, because this is also dependent on engine modes and things like that. Yeah. So in the medium, McLaren was the best. Mercedes, number 2.
Okay.
And then, shout out Racing Bulls, number 3 in the medium speed corners. And then Red Bull, number 4, Ferrari, number 5. Medium speed. Okay.
All right.
High speed corners, McLaren, number 1.
Okay.
Mercedes, number 2.
Okay.
Racing Bulls, number 3. Ferrari, number 4. Red Bull, number 5.
Okay. Ooh.
So, you know what this tells me?
Hmm.
Mercedes is right there on like
Yeah.
every single one of these corner types. And
Yeah.
that lines up with what our eyes are seeing too.
Yeah, it does. It really
Yeah.
does. So I think this could be a good weekend for Mercedes. I think also
Yeah.
Aston too, right? That could be
Yeah.
really
Oh man.
interesting.
Are they gonna pull a heater?
That'd be so
Woo!
cool.
That would be crazy.
Oh my god, that'd be so fun.
Fernando is already gassing up Max because I don't know if you've seen the comments and
Yeah.
all the things he's saying. He's gassing up Max because I'm sure they're gonna make like a play at him,
Oh
for
yeah.
2026 or 2027 because hey, even Honda came out in Japan and was like, we would love to work with Max
Yeah.
Verstappen in the future. And where is Honda going to? Aston Martin
Aston
Racing.
Martin.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and where's Adrian Newey? Aston
Aston
Martin. So it's
Martin.
like, all the tea leaves are starting to take shape
Yeah.
and everything. And so maybe there might be something that comes out of that. But
Yeah.
if Alonso pulls a heater this weekend, like he's not only going to be gassing up Max, he's going to be gassing up the team and being like, look, we're on the upward swing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it could be a fun weekend. And I mean, even there's some drama brewing for the weekend, right?
There is? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There is. I
Yeah,
almost
there
forgot.
is. The Flexi wings are still kind of being dramatic, right? I was unaware of this. So please fill me in because this is high grade F1T right now.
Oh, yeah. So, this is on the level. Maybe not quite yet because the FIA hasn't ruled on anything, but this is approaching the level of Brandon Brake Boosted on X, who discovered the mini DRS that
Yeah.
ultimately, from the video, ended up making it to the FIA and
Yep.
getting investigated and then, outlawed.
It's giving the fans discovering Chase Elliott's pit crew removing tape on his spoiler on the broadcast in the background
Yes.
of him getting interviewed, and
A
NASCAR picked up on it.
fan taping Max Verstappen touching Lewis Hamilton's
Yeah.
wing.
Yes.
The
It's
fans,
this level.
yes, the
right?
fans have power. So
Yes.
Citrus,
Fill me
who's
in.
on X, posted a video of the McLaren rear wing in Suzuka, pretty much laying backwards like an old man in a recliner,
as we thought it was doing.
Yeah, which we thought it was doing, and they did the updated load tests, and everything for the rear wings was implemented in Suzuka.
Yep.
Lando Norris's, I think it was Lando Norris's car, was chosen randomly after the race for additional scrutiny and scrutineering and passed all of these tests. So the only thing that we can assume is that, the new load tests as they were prescribed, slot gap openings being, 0.5 millimeters, no more flexion, etc. All this stuff that it passed those tests. But the video shows the rear wing is laying way back.
Yes.
And other creators have taken that video and have gone on and done a whole comparison. So Vanja, who I mentioned before, also a good aero creator as well.
Yes. Vanja is big in the F1 technical
big in the
too.
F1
I recognize
technical.
that name, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Vanja did something that I did in grad school, which is pretty funny, where you take like an image and you can, based off of the resolution, you can zoom all the way down to pixels.
Yep.
You can use something in the image that is a certain distance.
Yes.
And you can count how many pixels are covering that particular distance, and you can create a scaling factor, which is each pixel is roughly this distance on this image. And so he did that, created like a reference line at a given speed for all four cars, and then up to a top speed along the straight, and measured the deflection and found, guess who was number one that was flexing the most?
McLaren.
No, Mercedes. Which
we theorized as well.
We talked about this before. We have, haven't we? So we're getting our ducats now.
I know.
So Mercedes number one, McLaren number two, Ferrari number three, Red Bull number four. So in the flexions, to be fair, Ferrari, Red Bull like majorly lower than Mercedes and McLaren. Even though, and Ferrari only marginally higher than Red Bull. But all that to say that not Vanja's, but Citrus's original post got retweeted by Jos Verstappen. And then,
this is messy.
yeah. And then the retweet and all this stuff. So it started getting a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
A reporter during the driver briefing before Bahrain asked Max Verstappen about it. And Max said he's seen the video.
Okay.
So he's seen the video, and then
Okay.
he takes a very politically correct kind of a response after that of, I know what's going on, which, by the way, Red Bull was the one all along that was complaining about McLaren's rear wing, complaining about McLaren's front wing, and saying they're exploiting flexible aero.
Yeah.
Pierre Wash said as much. And so Max Verstappen says, we know what's going on, or I know what's going on, but I can't, occupy myself with videos or conspiracies and these kinds of things. I have to just sort of let the FIA do what they're going to do. Well, then the race, John Noble at the race, shout out John, goes and posts an article then that from an FIA source that the FIA is aware of the video that's on social media, but cannot do anything until a team files a formal protest. And so I quote tweeted that article and I was like, the team's filing formal protests in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's like, okay, the FIA basically saying like, we can't do anything until somebody files a protest. That's not going to make the teams file a protest now. So
no.
Yeah.
But they just laid out that if you want to do something about this, our inbox is open, right? Yeah.
People are aware of what's going on. And remember, I think it was it China? Maybe it was China. There was a whole story that came out after, I think it was China, that said that the FIA was not pleased still with what they saw on the videos, on the cameras.
Yes.
And that, even though like the teams were exploiting or that were passing the load tests,
we're still exploiting.
They were still not pleased with what they were seeing in the videos.
Yeah.
So that's the tea. That's what's going on.
Interesting. I'm curious. I'm now curious, is there another TD cooking? Is somebody going to actually throw that protest in? Because that's like the rumor about the water in the tires, right? It was very like, unless somebody's got hard proof, it's just hearsay, right?
Yeah. And which they then did go and investigate, and look at they went as far as like even taking samples of the tires with Pirelli,
tires and all of that,
and really looking into it. So I think, I'm sure it will get protested. The FIA will dig into it a bit deeper. But what I'm wondering, Molly, and I'd like to get your take on this, and this is something we talked about before. We talked about the TD, the rear wing TD, is that in the TD, the FIA gave themselves a get out of jail free card by saying, we reserve the right to use video evidence in spite of somebody still passing the load test. We reserve the right to use video evidence to essentially dig deeper or, or investigate this further. And this is exactly what it seems like is happening. Teams are finding a way to pass the load test, but still getting flex and getting all the things that they want. So is the FIA just going to go, sorry, last year in a regulation set, you're passing the load test, it's all good. Other teams get the green light now to do it. Or are they going to go, yeah, okay, we're going to use the videos. But then at that point, what do you specify as like a limit criteria?
Yeah, right.
How do you tell the teams what is too much flex and what's enough flex? Because it's going to flex.
Exactly, yeah. How do you quantify that and determine a limit on that, right?
How do you regulate it?
Yeah, and how do you enforce that?
Yeah.
But even then, that whole little get out of jail free card is completely contradicted by the fact that they have video evidence right now that suggests that it's flexing beyond what they would be pleased in, and they're saying, well, we can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right?
I wonder if they could specify. We know they have high resolution cameras on the back of these cars. And, let's just be clear for the listeners. The video that Citrus, Vanja, all these guys that are creators are using is the F1 TV feed video, which is not the high resolution cameras. These are different cameras that the FIA is using. So all these like little pixel counts and things that we are doing, they can do with much more accuracy with the cameras that they have. So it is not outside of the realm of possibility, I believe, for them to, to be able to look at the video, establish a baseline when the car is from the video in the pit lane, at pit lane speeds. Here is where the base point of that trailing edge, the rear wing is.
Yep.
And then at the peak speed, at the max speed, here's where it's now laid over to, and be able to then, using the same methods, calculate how much that wing is flexing and go back to the teams and be like, sorry guys, you're over exploiting this stuff. We're going to standardize that from low speed to high speed, your wing can only flex this distance, half the distance, quarter of the distance.
Yeah.
And it's up to you to ensure that when we go back and check the videos, that you're not going to be outside of these 2 bars. And it would be very easy for them to also draw 2 lines on a video and have this be, go, no go kind of a thing.
Yeah, and it's extremely easy to teach in OCR, like an optical tracking or optical camera reference, to look for it automatically for you, so you're not manually combing through data.
Yes, yeah. So it is possible to do it. I think it's going to take a lot of effort.
Yeah, and
you're going to also, you're also going to potentially expose yourself to a lot of pain from teams who could argue that this criteria is track specific criteria and wing specific criteria. A high downforce wing is going to have much more load than a low downforce wing, right? So then how do you start to navigate that?
And it begs the question then, as a series, is it actually sustainably enforceable? And does it make sense to enforce? And it could be one of those where it's just kind of like, it doesn't make sense to open the can of worms, that happens, unfortunately, a lot in some of these series, that it just doesn't make sense to open that can of worms and just keep, they're just like, we have to live with it,
which comes back to the whole initial point of last year in a regulation set, we just wipe our hands and go,
exactly.
what?
Yeah, right. I will say it is my life's goal to have a regulation written after something that I did.
Yes.
I'm not going to lie. I would love to be the reason a regulation gets written.
Yeah, and we would we would find some cool nickname for that regulation, call it the Molly reg or the something, whatever it was.
We have the Max Verstappen safety car rule. I mean, there's plenty, but I would love to be the reason a regulation gets put in the technical side, right?
There's plenty of races left in the season, Molly. There's plenty of opportunities for us to find something.
I can't wait. I'm going to be really, really intrigued if we want to talk about low downforce wing spec.
Oh, yeah.
The Monza wings?
Ooh.
No.
Hey, is Red Bull finally going to have a Monza spec wing this year? That's something to look forward to with Monza, well, at least for nerds like us, because they traditionally never have. They don't. But then they admitted after Monza that maybe they do need to actually look into doing something like this because they were suffering so much. Yeah, so maybe we'll see one.
Baku before Monza again or after?
Oh no, here we go. Okay, I got the schedule up again. I got the schedule
after.
Okay, let's test it. So we've got
Miami, Imola, Canada, I think, which I'll be at.
Oh my gosh, where's that? So Imola, Monaco. Oh wow. Not till September, Monza.
Oh yeah, so we'll
and it's after the Dutch Grand Prix, Zandvoort, and before Azerbaijan, so Baku.
Yeah. So we will see Monza spec before Baku.
Yeah. Yep, we will.
Be fun. Cool. I cannot wait. I know. And then it's what? Miami, Imola, Canada?
Miami? Oh, we missed one there, Molly. After Bahrain is Jeddah.
Oh, that's what it is.
Jeddah. So Jeddah's going to be a good one. Yeah, Jeddah could be a good track for Red Bull.
It could. I agree.
It could be a good track because it's relatively low deck, I think.
Yes.
Jeddah is. Miami, Mickey Mouse, Imola. Wow, there's a lot of races until Red Bull brings their update.
I know. That's terrifying to me. I was just looking at it the other day. I know, because I'll be in Canada, so I was like, what's the take gonna be?
Yeah.
And
you're
how's
going
it gonna
to
go?
Canada?
Yeah, I'll be in Canada.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Oh
In
yeah, so it'll be
June.
fun.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that'll be
Very
fun.
cool.
I'm still job hunting, so I figure I might as well travel while I have the
Heck
time.
yeah. Well, you got it. Shoot.
Yeah, and even if
Take
I have a
advantage.
job by then, sorry, it's already booked.
Yeah. I mean, if it's with a motorsport outfit or anybody in automotive at all, I mean, they will understand.
I
They'll be
hope that
like,
they would understand.
this is
So
why we wanted to hire you, because you're
yeah,
a
exactly
complete
right.
motorsport nut.
I get it. I get the
Yeah,
life.
exactly.
So, we'll
Good.
see.
Well, we've covered a lot of topics
Yes, we
today,
have.
Molly. I think it's been a really good episode. There's a lot to look forward to.
I'm so
Do we
excited.
want to lock down a prediction for Bahrain? Do you want to go that far? What do you think it's going to turn out for Bahrain? Who do you got? Top 3.
Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari with the upgrade.
Okay, so that's from team. What about drivers? Who do we think P1, P2, P3?
George.
Oh, George taking P1. Nice.
I don't know if I necessarily say George P1. I think George
Okay.
I'm going to give you podium
On the
in
podium,
no order.
Okay. Good.
Podium in no order.
Good.
George, Oscar, Lando, Max. Interchangeable.
Yeah. I've got Lando, Oscar, and George. And I will go so far as saying, oh man, Oscar versus Lando is going to be a tough one. Like, who's P1, P2? Yeah. These are interchangeable. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say Piastri P1, Norris P2, Russell P3. That's what I got.
All right.
Come at me after the race if I'm wrong. It's pretty much guaranteed to be wrong.
I'm going to say shock best of the rest, V-Carb and Aston.
Yes. Okay. Aston.
They could be a dark horse.
We will manifest this over the weekend.
Aston could be a dark horse this weekend. I want a dark horse. The Alpine is just so inconsistent. We know Pierre's really good at dragging a car that has no business being where it is in places, and then Jack is doing Jack things. But I don't know if I want a dark horse, the Aston.
Don't know how long Jack's going to last.
Or Aston, the Alpine. I don't know if I want a dark horse, the Alpine.
Yeah. But hey, it wasn't long ago that we were dark horsing. I think I was dark horsing, but we were sort of double dark horsing the McLaren.
It was, So.
But now they're up top. So
yeah, I think there could be some surprises this weekend in Bahrain.
Could be. And again, very variable conditions. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens. I haven't looked at the forecast. I don't think there's a chance of rain or anything.
No,
but
I don't believe so.
I don't know if it's going to be hot or cold.
Let's go look.
Yeah. I got, you know who usually comments on this? Mm-hmm. Our friend, Brandon.
Oh, yeah. He's always good.
Brake boosted. He's turned weatherman. Shout out, Brandon, if you're listening.
It's going to be hot.
Both qualifying in the race are currently not meeting the heat hazard threshold, so I don't expect a minimum weight increase this weekend. Oh, okay. So it will be hot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be hot. I'm staring at 92 degrees Fahrenheit on Saturday and 89 degrees Fahrenheit on Sunday. So.
And for an international crowd, that's 34 degrees centigrade and 31 degrees centigrade.
Yep. And that'll be about, in my experience, probably equate to about 125, 130 on track, depending. Oof. Yeah.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah.
So, a degrading surface, high degradation surface, and high track temps. Sounds like
hot
recipe
and slick,
for
man. Yeah.
Disaster for teams that don't know how to manage the tires, and probably really good sign for McLaren.
Yep. I agree. All right, you want me to take us home?
Yep.
Get
take
us out of
home,
here?
Molly. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget that you can like, rate, review, subscribe, and follow us anywhere that you get your favorite podcasts from. We are also over on X at Breaking Bias Pod, where Obbs and I are also hanging out doing this just in written form. So feel free to come hang out and connect with us over there as well. And on that note, thank you guys again so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Ciao.
Ciao. Done.
Yes.
Yay.
We did.
All right.